I passed my life in the UK test in just 5 days without reading a book and not knowing much about the UK culture or history, not even knowing what a constituency is. If you're someone who is like me, who doesn't have a lot of time to spare on revision, and you want a very quick way to pass the exam, then this video is for you. In this video, I'm going to share the tips and tricks that I personally used that helped me to pass the life in the UK test in just 5 days without extensive or extended revision time. If you don't know who I am, my name is Mingke, and I am a career coach that actually helps international students to land their jobs in the country. And in this special video, I'm going to share with you my personal experience of how I passed the test and how you can do it too if you are looking to apply for citizenship or permanent residence in the UK. So if you're struggling with your application, make sure to check out my free training video down below where I share the secrets and framework that you should use in order to land your job offer. With that, let's get started. So for those who are not from the UK or don't know much about the UK, in order to get the citizenship or the permanent residency, you have to pass a test which is called Life in the UK, which is a comprehensive exam that tests your understanding about the British life, culture, literature, arts, history, and also geography, and even sometimes sports. Imagine doing history exams and you are back in your home country having to study hours and hours for history exams just to remember some facts about which year this will happen. This is exactly what you need to do for your life in the UK test. And at the same time, it's not just a history. For example, you will also be tested like athletes who are the winner for the Olympic game for cycling in, let's say, 2000. So things like that will also come up in your test as well. So overall, if you are someone who doesn't know much about the test, it seems pretty daunting because it seems like you need to cram a lot of information in short period of time in order to pass this test, and you do need to study actually well for this exam. So how did I do it? I'm going to share with you how I managed to understand the test and crack the test in just 5 days. And the tips that I share with you are going to be pretty useful if you are preparing for any kind of test, like your driving test, your end of term exams, or during university, A-level, etc. All of the tests, they use similar concepts. So the first thing I did with this test is I made sure to understand what exactly it looks like, and what's the passing mark, just to understand the basic information about what is needed for the test, how does it look like, what kind of questions you're going to get. So for the Life in the UK test, it is a test where you're going to pay roughly £60 to do, and once you pass the test, it will be valid for the rest of your life. So you only need to do it once, and once you pass it, you can use it whenever you need to apply for permanent residency, even if it's like 5 years down the line. As long as you pass the exam, then you're good to go. And in terms of the structure of the test, it is a multiple question test, meaning that you are going to choose 1 out of 4 answers, or even sometimes 2 out of the 4 answers provided. And the threshold for pass is actually 75%, and there are 24 questions in the whole test where you have 40 minutes for the test, meaning that you're going to spend roughly just under 2 minutes for each question. So now, once I have understood it is a multiple choice question, meaning that I don't need to study it in depth, because if you need to write an essay about historical events or culture, then that requires you to do a lot more in-depth understanding and research as well as memorization. But the fact that it's a multiple choice question, it means you can just have surface understanding, and the breadth is more important than the depth. So after I have understood the structure of the exam, I decided to go with the tactic of broad coverage, meaning I'm going to just scratch the surface and grab as many facts as possible in my brain, rather than trying to understand how does this war influence the decision of another person, for example. The next thing I did as part of understanding the test was I actually practiced 1 or 2 practice questions. So this way, it allows me to understand what's the level of depth that they are actually requiring, and have a bit of taste of the style of the exam. And after I have tried 1 or 2 exam questions, it actually confirmed my thinking that this is just a surface level type of question rather than, in-depth essay type of question, and gave me confidence on my revision tactic, which is focusing on the breadth rather than the depth. Then the next thing I did was I decided to leverage my short-term memory rather than the long-term memory. Now, this is a common practice when you are doing any kind of exam, especially when you are cramming for exams in very short period of time. And here's the thing you need to understand between short-term memory and long-term memory. Long-term memory generally would stay in the brain for longer, but it would take a lot longer time in order to process that information into long-term memory, versus short-term memory, you can get it into the brain very quickly, but they will not stay here for a very long period of time. So in this purpose, because I only had 1 week to revise, I decided to use my short-term memory, which means most of the memorization and information absorption is going to happen in the next just few days. And I decided not to purchase the book, which most people recommended, purely because I knew most of the exams, they run under a question bank, meaning most of the questions you're going to get are randomly selected from a massive bank that they already have. So my strategy of approaching that is going to be practicing of questions, so that I have a sense of how they look like and have a good passing rate from the questions that are available online. Now, there's an obvious disadvantage of using this method, which is just to practice exam questions. You are going to get fragmented information rather than studying from a chronological order or a very systematic manner. But for the sake of passing the exam, this is the fastest method to get all of the information that you need in order to just pass the exam. And the next thing I did was to practice exam. I started with 5 to 10 exam papers every day for the first 3 days, and I started practicing a lot more questions for the last 2 days, so that I made sure I have time to practice every single exam paper, and I also had time to do all of them again. For the exam paper questions, I used a free website, which I'm going to link in the comment. I actually signed up for the membership, which is I think £9 per month, but it's free for the first 15 days or 30 days. I essentially leveraged that free period, and I didn't need to pay anything, and you can get 45 sets of questions for you to practice. Now let's talk about how I actually practice. When you are practicing exam papers, it's a process of learning, because this is your first time of seeing all of the information for the first time, and your success rate is going to be generally low. For the first time when I practiced, the average score for me was actually just 50%. When you are practicing exams without actually knowing much about the UK culture and all of the things, then you would expect to have relatively low score. But this is what you need to do. So for all of the errors that you made, and for the questions that you're not certain, make sure you put them down somewhere in a note, so that you have a document that has all of the errors and mistakes that you have made, and then try to put them in a chronological order as well, especially for questions that are related to history. So this way, not only you are practicing exam questions, getting used to the style, the type of questions, but at the same time you are learning and summarizing all of the learnings and knowledge into a single document that is for yourself. This is a document I had on my phone when I was practicing all the questions, and you can see I have categorized them into sports, history, politics, science, etc. So this way it's easier for me to track and find information. You should be constantly taking notes and recording all of the mistakes in your document whenever you're practicing the questions, whether you're going through all of them for the first time or the second time. So I have been doing that for the first 4 days when I was going through practice questions, and I made sure I went through all of the practice questions in the first 4 days. And the last day of 5 days, the day before your exam, this is when majority of the consolidation and the reconfirmation is going to happen in your brain. You don't have to go through all of the questions for a second time, but this is a process where you're going to learn and reconfirm the learnings that you had before. And remember the document that you have been putting notes into, you are going to go through that document and try active recalling. Active recalling is a process where you are actually trying to, remember things. This is something that you can get help from your friends or families. What you're going to do is ask them to ask you some questions based on the facts from the document. So for example, when did Crimean War happen? Which year did it happen? And that would force you to actually remember it in your brain, but only again on just the surface level. And also, if you don't have anyone around you, you can try to test yourself. This would allow you to actually try to connect all the dots. So for example, one event happened in 1969, then I remember there's something else that happened in 1969, and then this would force you to actually make the connection and use that time as the anchor to bring two different events. And another thing I did as well was on my way to the test center, which I took a tube. There was no signal. I couldn't practice my exam questions again. So I essentially pull out this document for myself, and I could just try to do the active recalling by myself on the tube for like a good hour. This is actually pretty good because when you're sitting by yourself in a tube, you don't have distraction. You just put your earplug, your headphone in, and then you can listen to some music while trying to remember as much as you can. Now, in terms of the timing, during the day on the test day, you want to get up a bit earlier. So 1 or 2 hours earlier than your wake up time. This is for you to utilize your morning wakeness to try to remember as many facts as possible. And also going through any last minute mistakes that you made from day before or during the day on the way to the test center. And this is how I managed to pass my life in the UK test in just 5 days without actually reading a book or understanding much about the British culture. And this is how you can do the same. So if you enjoyed this video, I have lots of other videos on job application, career direction, as well as tips and tricks similar to this on your application for jobs. Make sure to like and subscribe this video, and I'll see you in the next one.